Hey, you. Ever feel like trying to get your head around cybersecurity is like being handed the keys to some crazy spaceship with, I don't know, 1,000 blinking lights?
Ah, yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
You know it's important, right? But just figuring out where to even start, it feels kind of impossible sometimes.
Totally. The sheer amount of info out there about protecting, well, everything digital, it can definitely feel overwhelming, even for people in the field.
Well, today on the deep dive, we're going to try and be your expert guides through that cockpit. We've looked closely at some foundational cybersecurity resources.
Yeah, think of it as the core knowledge an analyst really builds upon day to day.
Exactly. And our mission really is simple. Pull out the absolute essential tools and concepts that a cybersecurity analyst uses pretty much every single day.
We want to give you a clear, hopefully engaging understanding of this whole area.
Without getting totally lost in the super technical weeds, you know?
Exactly. We're aiming to cut through the noise, focus on the practical stuff, the everyday tools in that security analyst's toolkit.
Right. And understanding not just what they are,
but why they're essential.
Yeah.
For keeping up a strong defense. That's the key.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When an analyst, starts their day, what are the absolute must-haves they're reaching for? What's actually in this foundational toolkit?
Okay, good place to start.
Okay.
So while the specific tools, they can vary a bit, depends on the organization, their size, industry, what threats they usually see.
Sure, it makes sense.
But there are definitely some industry standard applications that you see pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Being familiar with those is, well, crucial.
Like what? Give us the inside scoop.
Okay, well, a really central piece for many is a SIEM tool. That's SIEM, Security Information and Event Management.
SIEM. Got it.
Think of a SIEM as kind of like the brain of a security operations center. It's a pretty sophisticated application. Its job is to collect and analyze log data from all across an organization's systems.
Log data, you mean those records of like everything that happens on the network? That sounds like an unbelievable amount of information.
It is. It really is. Every server, every app, every single device generates these little activity records, trying to manually review all that to spot one potential threat.
Yeah, forget it.
It'd be like looking for one specific grain of sand on a beach. But what's really cool here, the fascinating part, is how SIEMs turn all that noise, that overwhelming data, into something you can actually use. Actionable intelligence.
How?
Well, they automatically identify patterns, anomalies, things that look out of place, stuff that could indicate a threat or a risk or a vulnerability. And then they alert the analysts.
Ah, so it flags the important bits in that huge data mountain.
Precisely, like a smart assistant. And to make that easy to see, SIEMs usually use visual dashboards.
Okay.
These dashboards organize the data, slice and dice it different ways, letting analysts quickly see trends, spot spikes in activity, zoom in on potential problems.
Interesting. The source stuff we looked at also mentioned different ways these SIEMs can be hosted, like on-premise versus cloud. What's the main difference there?
Yeah, that basically boils down to where the SIEM software itself and all the data it's chewing on actually lives and who manages it.
Okay.
So on-premise means the company hosts everything themselves on their own hardware, their own infrastructure, which takes more in-house expertise to set up and keep running.
Right, you need the people for that.
Cloud-hosted SIEMs, though, they're managed by someone else, a third-party provider, in their cloud environment. And the material we saw suggested that maybe teams with less experience might lean towards cloud options, just because they're generally simpler to get started with, less day-to-day looking after needed.
Makes sense. Less internal stuff to worry about. Okay, so SIEM tools give that big picture view from the logs. What's next? What's another essential tool in the box?
Another really critical one is the network protocol analyzer, often just called a packet sniffer.
Packet sniffer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while SIEMs are looking at historical logs, packet sniffers are all about capturing and looking at live network traffic as it's actually happening, real time.
So they're kind of listening in on all the digital chats happening on the network.
Yeah, in a way. But in a controlled, analytical way. They record all the raw data that a computer connected to that network sees. And this lets analysts dive really deep into the individual packets, those little chunks of data being sent back and forth.
And why is that useful?
Well, what's fascinating here is that by looking right inside those packets, analysts can figure out network performance problems, understand exactly how different systems are talking, and, really crucially, spot malicious traffic patterns that maybe a SIEM, looking only at logs, might miss.
Okay, got it. So tools for the past. logs and tools for the present, live data. What about the actual procedures for dealing with security incidents when they happen? That's where these playbooks come in, right?
Exactly right. Playbooks are basically the standard operating procedures, the SOPs for cybersecurity. They're detailed manuals. They spell out the specific actions an analyst needs to take when responding to different kinds of security incidents or even doing routine security tasks.
So like a checklist.
More than just a checklist. What's really vital to get is that playbooks aren't just step-by-step guides. They sort of codify best practices. They ensure responses are consistent, effective, no matter who's handling it, which ultimately means less potential damage, faster recovery.
Okay, can you give us like a concrete example? How would a playbook be used in, the real world?
Yeah, the material we had offered a pretty good illustration. Imagine like a small doctor's office, and they have a data breach.
Okay, nightmare scenario.
Right. So an incident response firm gets called in, maybe by the cyber insurance company, to investigate. The security analyst who's leading that forensic investigation, they lean heavily on playbooks.
To guide them.
Exactly, to guide every step. The playbooks make sure the investigation is methodical, that all the relevant data gets collected, analyzed correctly, and that the findings will actually stand up for the insurance company's review.
So it's about having that plan locked down before a crisis hits. And there were two specific types mentioned: chain of custody and protecting and preserving evidence. Those sound super important, legally speaking.
Absolutely critical. The chain of custody playbook is all about keeping a super meticulous record. Who handled the evidence? What is the evidence? Where was it found? Why was it collected?
Okay.
It's basically a detailed log tracking every single movement of that piece of evidence from the second it's found until it ends up in a report or maybe even court.
Right.
Because if you can't prove definitively that the evidence wasn't tampered with, its value just plummets.
Yeah, like in detective shows. Carefully bagging the evidence, documenting every single handoff. Digital stuff needs that same rigor.
Precisely the same level.
Yeah.
And the protecting and preserving evidence playbook,
Yeah.
that one focuses more on the technical side of handling digital evidence. Because digital evidence can be really fragile.
How so?
Well, digital data can be lost or changed super easily, especially if you just say, power down a device, gone.
Oh, right.
So this playbook emphasizes something called the order of volatility, which basically a priority list. What data do you need to grab first because it's most likely to disappear?
Like stuff in memory versus on a hard drive.
Exactly. Data in a computer's RAM. Way more volatile than data stored on a hard drive.
Yeah.
And the absolute critical principle here is you avoid interacting directly with the original evidence.
Oh.
Analysts make exact copies, forensic images of the data, and then they do all their investigation work on those copies. That prevents any accidental changes or, compromising the original.
That makes total sense. Okay, so that's the core toolkit, the immediate stuff for an analyst. But the sources also touched on broader skills, wider capabilities that are really valuable. What else should someone in this field kind of know to really excel?
You're right. Those core tools are definitely indispensable. But a truly effective analyst, they often have a wider range of skills and knowledge. Things like programming skills, a solid grasp of different operating systems, and just a keen awareness of common security weaknesses.
Programming. Wow, that sounds like a whole different job. How does that fit in with security analysis?
Well, programming skills, especially in languages like, say, Python and SQL, they can seriously boost an analyst's capabilities. Python is really common for automation. Writing little scripts to automate repetitive tasks. That doesn't just save a ton of time.
It probably reduces mistakes, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reduces the potential for human error in routine checks or data crunching. And then SQL, that's the standard language for talking to databases.
Okay.
And since cybersecurity involves analyzing just massive amounts of data stored in databases, SQL lets analysts efficiently ask questions, filter things out, pull exactly the specific info they need from those big data stores.
Okay, so programming here isn't necessarily about building the next Facebook. It's more about making tasks easier and digging into data better. What about operating systems? I mean, I use Windows every day. Is that enough?
Well, being familiar with common systems like Windows and Mac OS is definitely helpful, sure. But a really strong understanding of Linux is also incredibly valuable in the cyber world. Linux is open source, which means its underlying code is public. Anyone can look at it, improve it, customize it. That fosters this great collaborative environment.
And it's used a lot in servers and stuff, right?
Widely used in servers, yeah. And it forms the basis for tons of cybersecurity tools. And it's important to clarify, like the source did, Linux itself, it's an OS, not a programming language.
Right.
But it heavily relies on the command line interface. that text-based way of telling the computer exactly what to do using typed commands.
Command line. Yeah. Sounds a bit old school, but I guess that direct control would be really powerful for security tasks.
It gives you very granular control, yes.
Now, the term web vulnerability came up. What exactly is that?
A web vulnerability is, well, basically a weakness,
Right.
a flaw. Could be in a web application's code, its design, how it's set up. Something a bad actor could potentially exploit.
Exploit for what?
Could be for unauthorized access to sensitive data, maybe stealing information or even tricking users into installing malware. Nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And to help everyone stay up to date on the most critical, most common web app risks, there's this project, OSP, the Open Web Application Security Project.
Oh, WASP. Heard of that.
They publish a regularly updated top 10 list. It's really an essential resource for anyone trying to secure web applications.
Good to know there's a go-to guide for that. We also hear constantly about antivirus software and intrusion detection systems, IDS. Are those still fundamental tools?
Oh, absolutely. Antivirus software, or anti-malware as it's often called now, it's still a basic foundational layer of defense for most computers and devices.
Still important then.
Definitely. Its main job is to prevent, detect, and get rid of malicious software, viruses, worms, ransomware, all that. It usually works by scanning files in memory for known patterns or signatures associated with malware.
Okay, and IDS, intrusion detection systems.
Right. IDS takes a more proactive approach for the network. It constantly monitors network activity, and it sends out alerts if it sees suspicious patterns or behavior that might mean someone's trying to break in.
Like what kind of behavior?
Things like unauthorized access attempts, or maybe really unusual network traffic patterns that could signal data being stolen. They often work by analyzing those network packets we talked about.
The little data chunks.
Yeah, analyzing those packets to spot potential threats in real time.
Yeah.
So you're right, antivirus is kind of like protection on the device itself.
And IDS is like a security camera for the network traffic.
That's a really good way to put it, yeah.
Okay. What about encryption? That always sounds incredibly complicated.
It can seem that way, but at its core, encryption is just a fundamental security process. It turns readable data into an unreadable format.
Scrambles it up.
Basically, yeah. So that only authorized people, the ones with the right decryption key, can access the original information. It converts plaintext, normal, understandable data into ciphertext, the scrambled, encrypted version.
And the main goal?
The main goal is confidentiality, protecting sensitive data, whether it's just sitting stored somewhere or being sent across a network.
Gotcha.
And it's maybe worth quickly mentioning the difference between encryption and encoding, because they sound similar. So both change how data looks, right?
Yeah.
But encoding is usually just about making sure different systems can understand each other correctly using standard public methods. Encryption, though, is specifically for security. It uses complex algorithms to make data totally unintelligible without the secret key.
Oh, okay. Encryption secret, encoding compatible. Got it. Lastly, penetration testing. It sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It can sound dramatic, yeah. But penetration testing or pen testing is a really crucial security assessment technique.
So what is it, really?
Essentially, it's a simulated cyber attack. It's done by ethical hackers, good guys, with the organization's full permission, of course.
Right.
And their goal is to find vulnerabilities in systems, networks, websites, applications, even security processes before the real bad guys do.
So you hire people to try and hack you?
Pretty much. The objective isn't to cause harm, obviously, but to proactively find those weaknesses that real attackers could exploit. It gives a really thorough checkup of how strong the security is, looking from both inside and outside threats. What's super valuable is it's a real-world test of your defenses before an actual attack happens.
Wow, okay. That's a really comprehensive look at the tools and concepts. It definitely sounds like, building a career in cyber involves a huge range of skills. Now, the materials also talked a lot about creating a cybersecurity portfolio. Why is that so important? What does a good one even look like?
Yeah, the portfolio, it serves as this dynamic way for professionals, especially if you're starting out or trying to move up, to really showcase their education, their technical skills, their practical knowledge to potential employers.
So more than just a resume.
Oh yeah, much more. Think of it as a more in-depth, hands-on demonstration of what you can actually do, compared to a traditional resume, which is usually just a summary of experience, right? The portfolio provides concrete proof, evidence.
So it's like saying, look, don't just take my word for it. Here's stuff I've actually done. What are some good ways someone could, put one together?
Well, the resources we looked at mentioned several options, from really simple organization methods up to more technical online platforms.
Right.
Well, a basic approach could just be creating a really well-organized documents folder on your own computer, maybe with clear subfolders for like your resume, certificates, projects you did with specific tools, programming exercises, that kind of thing.
Okay, simple enough.
Using cloud storage like Google Drive or Dropbox gives you the extra benefit of easy file sharing. You can just send a link to an employer. Plus, any updates you make are automatic.
Right, convenient. What about more sort of polished ways to show it off?
For a more professional online look, you could use website builders, Google Sites, or others like it. They often have templates, let you embed documents, screenshots, make pages that look good on phones.
Oh, nice.
Plus, you get your own web address, a URL you can stick right on your resume.
Okay. And for the more technical folks?
For those comfortable with it, using a Git repository like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket is another great option. You create a project, which is your portfolio, and store files, lab work, scripts, screenshots in there. You do something called Markdown to make it look good online.
Okay, lots of options depending on your comfort level and how you want to present it. What kind of projects or actual items would make a portfolio strong? What should be in it?
The materials gave some solid examples, actually, drawn from the program they were part of. Things like maybe writing a professional statement about your cybersecurity interests and goals.
Okay.
Or documenting how you did a practice security audit and what you found. Showing your skills, analyzing network traffic, maybe demonstrating your way around Linux commands, or writing SQL queries.
Practical examples.
Exactly. Documenting vulnerabilities you found in a test system. Keeping a journal like you were handling a real incident. Showing you can parse log files. Even including tailored resumes for cyber roles. The key is showing tangible skills, proving you can apply what you've learned.
That gives some really concrete ideas. Now, there was a big warning, an important caution about what not to put in a portfolio, what should definitely be left out.
Yes, this is absolutely critical. Avoid including any private, copyrighted, or proprietary information that you don't have explicit permission to share.
Like stuff from work.
Exactly. Sensitive data from previous employers or projects. Sharing that kind of stuff can have really serious legal and ethical consequences. Big trouble.
Good point.
Also, if you do build an online portfolio, like on GitHub or Google Sites, it's generally a really good idea to keep it set to private until you're totally happy with it and ready to actually share it with employers.
That's crucial advice. Definitely better safe than sorry there. Okay, so to quickly recap our deep dive today, we've explored that essential analyst toolkit, the huge role of SIME tools for logs,
the power of packet sniffers for looking at live network traffic, and just how important playbooks are for effective, consistent incident response.
And we broadened out from that core toolkit to cover other foundational skills like programming with Python and SQL for automation and data digging.
Understanding operating systems like Linux, knowing about web vulnerabilities and resources like the OWASP Top 10.
And the ongoing importance of antivirus, intrusion detection systems, encryption for keeping data safe, and pen testing for proactively finding weaknesses.
And finally, we talked about just how valuable building a solid cybersecurity portfolio is to really show your skills and knowledge to employers using various methods from simple folders to online sites and repos.
Hopefully, this whole discussion has given you, listening in, a much clearer, maybe more digestible understanding of these fundamental bits of cybersecurity.
Absolutely. Getting a grip on these foundational elements is really essential for anyone who wants to understand the basics of cybersecurity and how digital stuff gets protected effectively. We really hope we've maybe shed some light on concepts that might have seemed a bit fuzzy or overwhelming before.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. Given how cyber threats are constantly changing, always getting more sophisticated, what specific area of tools or practices that we talked about today do you think is going to be the most critical for organizations to really focus on and invest in over the next few years? And maybe more importantly, why do you think so? Definitely something worth pondering as you keep exploring this constantly shifting and incredibly important field.